morning at NTV.
Africa is so rich and yet so poor. I'm sure you have heard about this, you've read about it, or in some kind of way interacted with it. This morning, we want to put a spotlight on that, among several other issues, and look at this continent. Wealthy as it is, for some reason, things just are not moving as they should. Why? What are the challenges, and even more importantly, what can we do to address these challenges? There's somebody who has said, I will do something about it, at least, put the information out there so people can know what needs to be done. Let's talk about this on the big story. My guest is a gentleman that is probably not new to many of you out there, David Sseppuuya. He is a former chief editor-in-chief, that is, of the New Vision, and then moved to the Daily Monitor. He was executive editor there, and moved on. He'll be telling us what he has been up to, but he's authored a book, Africa's Industrialization and Prosperity. An incredible book. We'll get to that. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Joe.
What have you been up to? Where have you been? From doing the journalism work as we knew you back then, what have you been up to?
Well, behind the scenes, but still doing journalism work. I've been consulting with the World Bank and the Bank of Uganda over the last 4 or 5 years since I left the newspapers.
Okay, and what's that shift like? Many times you get ingrained in a career and you're thinking, this is it for me, I've got to keep going, and little do we think about changing gears.
Yes, of course, in the world of consultancy, having come from the newsroom, there's less hassle in terms of daily deadlines and that kind of thing, but it's still a lot of hard work. But you make the mental shift from what you've been doing for 20 years to something different. Life changes. You can't keep in the same mode all the time.
You've got into writing an incredible book that you have written, but for starters, even as we paint the picture around this, you in this book bring out clearly a picture that we have read about, we have seen the fact that this continent is extremely rich and yet it's extremely poor. Let's first talk about the wealth of this continent, because many times people look around and they're thinking, wait a minute, you're talking about Africa being wealthy. Where is the wealth? What we see is disease, poverty, famine, wars, and all this confusion.
Well, the wealth is in our natural resources, be it the biological or the geological, but I'll concentrate on the geological. Africa is home to 30% of the world's minerals.
30%?
30%. But we are poor because we do not understand, we fail to grasp the fact that natural wealth is what brings about progressive wealth, in the sense that once you convert the natural wealth, what I'll call natural capital, into productive capital, then you become wealthy. That's how countries have become prosperous. That's how countries have industrialized. They've used their natural capital, their minerals, and their hydrocarbons to industrialize. And that's where Africa is getting it wrong. We just sell these things. We do not convert them.
Why? Is it that we are ripped off, or is it that we don't have what it takes to turn all these things into what these people turn them into and resell them to us?
Yeah, I think we just haven't picked the vision. We need to study world history, and we'll realize, once we study world history, we'll realize that all nations that have become prosperous have done so through industrializing. And what do they use to industrialize? You use your natural resources to industrialize. What we do here, we treat our natural resources as food instead of treating it as seed. So we eat the seed instead of planting it.
You make the case for industrialization as opposed to agriculture in the case of Africa.
Yes.
Now, about half, to be exact, 48.9% of East Africa's arable land is here in Uganda. That's land that's suitable for agriculture.
Yes.
When I was in school, I don't know what it was like for you many years ago. For us, they used to tell us agriculture is the backbone of Uganda. And of course, as you get to see so many things, you realize that as a country, we have potential to be food basket of not just the region, but even Africa as a whole. And some people have been saying, look, can we focus on our comparative advantage? We cannot make cars as good, as well as Japan does. Even if we attempt, it might take us another 100 years. But you see, as far as food is concerned, that's there. Is our comparative advantage. Let's capitalize on it and do everything that we can, because you see, people will always eat. Even 100 years from today, people will still need food. It will not and ever at any one time have an alternative. But you're saying, no, no, no. We are pointing our guns, if you like, in the wrong direction. It shouldn't be agriculture. It should be industrialization. Yeah. Tell me about that.
You've called it agriculture a backbone. Is it a strong backbone? You don't want to have a weak backbone because you will not move. Any animal, any mammal with a weak backbone will not move. Agriculture is weak. Agriculture is a low productivity activity. Anywhere in the world you find agriculture is low productivity. But what you are correct about is that agriculture is critical for nations. It's critical for food security. But that's it. Agriculture does not transform economies. There's no economy that has been transformed by agriculture.
That would be the first and say, look, let's make money out of this food, because people will need food.
Yes, people will need food, and indeed, we are not saying we should abandon agriculture, but we are saying we should not focus exclusively on agriculture. Agriculture should be at the lowest point. Why is that? Because it is low productivity. It takes, Mwalimu Nyerere told the Commonwealth Conference in Melbourne in 1980, that we Africans, structured as we are, producing agricultural produce, it takes, let's say in 1980, when he spoke, or let's just go back, 1965, it took Tanzania to produce 10 tons of cotton to buy one tractor. By 5 years later, it would have to produce 15 tons of cotton to buy the same tractor. By 1980, it would now take 30 tons of cotton to buy the same tractor. Agricultural commodities are of low value. Manufactured commodities are always of higher value. That's the essence of it. And that's the problem with the structure of our economies, in that we are producing low value material. I did a comparative study recently on Kenya. Kenya bought a Dreamliner, Boeing Dreamliner, you know, from the US, from Seattle. Now, Kenya produces lots of flowers, but the flowers, how many tons of flowers does it take to buy a single aeroplane? Now, let's look at the reverse. The United States, which produces Boeing Dreamliners, is also an agricultural power. But if anything, it's probably the greatest agricultural power in the world. But the United States did not rest on its agricultural laurels. If it had done so, it would not be the superpower it is today. It wouldn't be the world's biggest economy. Or for that matter, any of the other big economies, the UK, France, Germany. They all have agriculture, but they put it at the level where it's supposed to be. You cannot compete when you're producing flowers and coffee and cotton, and others are producing vehicles and smartphones and aeroplanes.
How do we get started with this? How do we reinvent the wheel if we are to go that direction? Because also bear in mind, David, that truth be told, the foreign markets are very unfavorable to us. The ground is not leveled as we would want it to. If, let's say, we decided, let's make cars, you know, is the US going to be open to cars coming from Uganda? They make their own, and Japan and so on. Yeah,
but let's learn from others. I like the example of East Asia. The 4 original tigers of East Asia, they just decided to break away from this mode. They said, we are not going to keep Taiwan. Taiwan is one of the 4 Asian tigers. The other 3 are Singapore, Hong Kong, and South Korea. In 1966, Taiwan's 2 biggest income earners were, believe it or not, prostitution. They were providing prostitutes for the US forces who were fighting in Vietnam. And the second one was mushrooms. They were selling mushrooms. They were one of the biggest mushroom producers. But they decided to break away. They did not get into this business of let's add value to mushrooms. They said, let us go and do some real industry. And today, 1966, it's within my lifetime and the lifetime of many of Ugandans. They are into semiconductors, into chips and whatever else. If you go for it, you really can do it. Africa needs to go for it. We were at the same level as all those fellows 40, 50 years ago. But they focused, they decided we are not going, they realized that they cannot progress just producing mushrooms and coffee. No.
I would like to think that if we are going to bring this A game, if you like, as Africa, we've got to cooperate even before we can penetrate the other markets. It might not be as easy, but to each other. How do we get to do this? Because many times there's all these factions, we don't like each other, we are squabbling over trivialities at times, I would like to think.
Yeah.
How do we do this as one unit?
Of course, we've got to rise above pettiness. For me, one of the things that irritates me about Africa is our pettiness. I am following the Kenyan election campaigns. They're into pettiness. Kenya, if they focused well, they have something called, they've discovered something called titanium. Titanium is a very good, in Kwale County. Kwale County is on the coast, on the Indian Ocean coast, bordering Tanzania. They've got $64 billion worth of reserves of titanium. Titanium is a very nice and strong mineral that has been called the new steel. It's even better than steel because it is 45% lighter. Now, to industrialize, you need some essential commodities like steel. You need fuel, be it coal, be it gas, be it oil. Now, those are the two basic ones. Kenya has these things. Then they get into the pettiness. If Mr. Raila Odinga and Mr. Kenyatta focused on that instead of the pettiness of who eats where, these, the little things that we know the Kenyan politics and the Ugandan politics too, yeah, sure. and wherever else. We get into those petty things and we fail to see the bigger picture. Today, the reason why Kenyans are, every single individual Kenyan wants a better life, wants more prosperity. That is why they are fighting like that within their parties themselves and at the national stage. Now, yet the pie, they're fighting over a little pie, yet there is a bigger pie out there if they got together and baked it together. And I've just given the example of titanium and the oil. They've just discovered oil. So they have two of the essential ingredients for industrialization. They should focus on that instead of the pettiness. So we need to see the wider picture. That's what Africa needs to do and get away from pettiness.
Let's bring it closer home to Uganda.
Yes.
If we are to go industrialization, I've heard the president talk about industrialization for quite a bit of time. I don't know whether though we are putting our money where our mouth is, but also, how critically can we crack this? When we look at our budget, our GDP is about what, 27 billion US dollars.
Yeah.
How much of that can we invest into industrialization, and what particularly, what would work for us, you think?
I think one of Uganda's industrialization is focusing quite a bit on agro-processing. That is really, really at the bottom. It's true, let's take our agricultural produce, but we have so much more. Uganda has so much more. We have lots of iron ore in the southwest and in the Kanungu, Kabale area and in the Manafwa area in eastern Uganda. Iron ore. Of course, we've discovered oil. And there's so much more. We have rare earths. We need to think of the minerals as inputs for industrialization. For now, we only think of the agricultural produce. And what do we do with the minerals? We export them. I actually had an issue with a problem with one of the a government official a few years ago. The people who offered to sell our to concession out our cobalt and copper mines. I said, why are we doing that? We should be using those things internally. And let me give you a quick example of what we can do with copper. Our copper, of course, since it was discovered, since we started mining it in the mid-1950s, we've been selling it as it. But how can we use it industrially? Today, we are trying to produce the Kira electric vehicle. Now, electric vehicles, one of their biggest ingredients is copper. Why? Because copper conducts. They're electric vehicles, therefore they use a lot of electricity. Copper is a conductor. Your average electric vehicle needs 80 kilograms of copper, as opposed to the car you and I drive today, the internal combustion engine, which takes 20 kilos of copper. So if we are going to produce electric vehicles over the long term, we need to have our copper. But if we are selling it, we are concessioning it out to whoever, these different people whom we call investors, they take it away and use it in their own places. And here we are, we are going to have to need copper. If we are going to produce electric vehicles on an industrial scale, we'll have nothing left. You see, the problem with minerals is that they are finite. They get finished. So we've been mining copper since the 1950s. It will get finished. But if we are going to take off as a manufacturer of electric vehicles, we'll have no copper left. So where will we look for, where will we get it from? We'll have to go outside. So we need to change our thinking. So the same thing applies to just about everything else. I mean, I'm very glad that we are building an oil refinery, or we are going to build an oil refinery, because an oil refinery is the beginning of building a petrochemical industry. We need to build petrochemical industries and stop just pumping away our oil, and I'm talking of the whole of Africa, because petrochemical industries by nature, petrochemical industries contribute to many of the manufactured things. Just about 90% of manufactured things have something that comes from petrochemicals. But if you sell the oil, I was in Nigeria about 2 months ago. The Nigerian economy is collapsing. Why? Because they pipe away every single liter of barrel of oil that they mine, that they extract from the ground. They should have petrochemical industries, and then they will have jobs for their people. Then they will grow. We will grow our economies. Uganda's economy will move from being a $26 billion economy to a $260 billion economy. If we build petrochemical industries, the same thing should happen elsewhere, in Tanzania with their gas, in Mozambique with their gas, in Nigeria with their oil, Angola with their oil. So that's the thinking we need to start. Move away from selling these things as they are, but use them as, it's called converting from natural capital into productive capital. Let's make our minerals productive capital. That's the argument I'm making.
These things that you say, I'll tell you with all honesty, to many Ugandans, they will sound convoluted. We are largely, unfortunately, a peasantry society. We are more concerned about bread and butter issues, Medeyaledo and so on, and now here comes Sseppuuya with his grand ideas, and I'm wondering how this is being received, you know, among our leaders, among our people out there, because again, many times also we struggle with change, moving away from the quote-unquote comfortable position to the uncomfortable position, which will, with time, get us something huge.
Yeah, we need to, yes, it's easy to be comfortable with what you know, but there is a saying in Luganda that atanaita itaya tenda nyino kufumbemba. It means, which means that if you've not traveled, if you've not been beyond your immediate confines, then you'll not know much beyond that. So we need for our policymakers, and I'm not saying they are not traveled, but they need to pick up our policymakers at whatever level. You know, the ministers, the legislators, the think tanks, all these people need to pick ideas from elsewhere. And I'll keep going back to East Asia. It's a very good, they have a very good model. Let's understand how it is that they move from the levels where we were with them at the same time to where they are today. And I think that's where lessons can be picked, and that's what I focused on quite a lot. That there are people, forget the Western nations, maybe those have gone too far ahead of us, but there are people who are like us or who are like us, and they are moving on. So our policymakers need to think beyond the immediate comforts. This man called Lee Kuan Yew, the former Prime Minister of Asia, of Singapore, he talks about his colleagues, his peers in the 1960s and 1970s. He talks about President Kenneth Kaunda. He says he pities him because Kaunda was there just fighting whites, and he says this man had no notion that he needs to change the economic situation in his country. So there is a kind of a narrowness with which our leaders think, and yet they need to be a little more broad-minded, and we have examples in East Asia.
So how do we turn this around? Because clearly you seem to say, and rightly so, I think, that it's got quite a bit to do with leadership.
Yes, policy.
You know, which comes from our leaders, without a doubt. Even when the technocrats will say, do this, that, and the other, if the people in charge say no, you know, it will be like squeezing water out of a rock. And I'm wondering how this mindset shift can happen. People have talked about it and I don't know, how do we get it worked on?
Well, the young people. We need to train our
Who's mentoring them? Who are they watching doing things?
Well,
right?
people like you. You are here on television. You are a bright young man. Get ideas out to people. I think many people look up to you. But anyway, I think I would consider you a young future leader. You need to pick up these visions and let's change our people. We need to go back actually to the young people, as it were. They always talk about youth being leaders of tomorrow. I think they need to pick these visions and run with them. So maybe we go back to school. What is the kind of curricula that we teach in our schools? And let's just get a mindset change, because we've been stuck too long in one mode of thinking. Maybe for us, the old guys, it's too late for us. And then the young guys need to pick it up. Let's
talk a bit about foreign aid. I am sure you've encountered the book Dead Aid by Dambisa Moyo. Now that you're into writing books, I'm sure you're reading quite a bit as well. And you hint on this, you know, in your book as well, on how aid is crippling us. These guys give us with one hand and take with another, and because anyway they are giving us, many times it's easy for us to let go of what we have, because these are our patrons in a way.
Yes.
How do we break this? Because we are so dependent on it, even though, without a doubt, it's difficult to see real tangible progress courtesy of aid.
Yeah. Aid does not help you much. One, aid, you know, even the use of that the noun aid is a bit misleading. It's like they've given you. No, they've not given you. Most of these, not all, but most of these are loans, which we are going to repay at a certain interest rate, and will be repaid in the future. So it's not free money for a start. But secondly, it's normally tied around certain conditionalities. If country X is giving you a loan, say, to construct a road from this place to the other one, they will bring in their own constructors. You know, a lot of it will be foreign. You know, there will be limited local content. They will bring their trucks. They'll bring their engineers. And so a lot of this money keeps going back to them, and then we are going to have to pay later. So we need to develop local capacity for some of these things. Maybe we can look at intra-African capacity, whatever it is, but to limit the flight of this very money that we've taken, so-called aid, into our economies, then back to building those people. They will always use their people to administer the aid. So that's not. But most of all, these are loans, and we know that the debtor is a slave to the creditor. So we need to get away from that. It's a dangerous thing.
You talk about young people and how we can get the ball rolling with them. One of your chapters you dedicated to talking about education.
Yeah.
You know, schooled but not educated.
Yes.
No. About that.
No, I didn't say it's called educated but not skilled. We do not have the relevant skills. What we do today in our universities and our secondary schools is we arm people with a lot of theoretical knowledge that is not applicable in the real world. Since the 1990s, we've had this explosion of universities all over Africa. Today, Kenya has about, when I was at university in the 1980s, in Kenya there was University of Nairobi, there was Egerton and Kenyatta, about 4 or 5 universities. Today they have about 40 or 50. Uganda, similarly, when I was, we had IU, we had Makerere and, you know, one other university. Today we have about 50. In Nigeria today, they have about 400 or 500 universities. What are they offering? People are coming out with paper things. And yet what builds economies are practical skills. Believe it or not, Taiwan and Germany, let's use Germany, one of the most highly developed countries, and even Taiwan, another big major economy, they have, relatively speaking, fewer people at university than those in polytechnics where they are getting good skills. Now, for us, we get these, than us Africans. So we get our people, they come out with papers that are not relevant at all. You cannot apply them at all. So we need a whole structural change even in education so that we give relevant skills that are going to build an economy. And if we are going to build an industrial economy, or even right now when we are still an agrarian economy, yes, let's give skills that will enhance agriculture. We actually still, I'm not saying we don't need agriculture, we still need to grow agriculture. Agriculture is too backward as it were. We need to advance it to certain levels. Let's give the relevant skills. So we are not skilled. We are educating people. We are giving them knowledge, but no skills. That's a problem.
Our budget
all over Africa.
Our budget is going to be read early June, not long from today. And well, of course, it's home and dry already. We are looking at about what, 29 trillion Uganda shillings. The allotments have been done, allocations here and there. If you were to advise on how we can do the allocation so that this money makes for us money, because ideally that's what it should be, that you invest money in different sectors so that there is progress, so that this money makes for you a lot more money. What do you think would be important? What should be priority for us?
Maybe not for this budget.
Of course, it's done already.
I think what we need is a whole structural change. The way the economy is structured, and that takes time in terms of working out the strategies, in terms of thinking them through. We need to start thinking, how best do we generate jobs? How best do we get the economy to run in a dynamic way? And then we put our money there. And again, as I'll keep going back to East Asia, they have good models of what they've done. One of the key things that South Korea did, both South Korea and Singapore, was to get their generate internal capital through savings. I mean, right now, I'll give a quick example. We have quite a lot of savings at NSSF. How is that money being invested? We keep investing our savings either offshore, you know, in other economies, in financial markets in other economies, or we invest in real estate, and that's a huge problem. That is, real estate in this country is a dead end. It does not take us anywhere.
Some will say we need cheap housing for people.
Yeah, but we build these things and nobody is staying in them. So whether at institutional level, like NSSF, or at the individual level, Joel has some money, what will he do with it? Then he goes and builds a shopping mall. Dead. It does not, we need to invest in tradables. So what these guys did in South Korea and Singapore is to take savings and then start channeling them into productive ends. People's savings, be it NSSF, be it whatever, savings at different levels, and you channel them into productive channels, and they generate much more. So they went into industries, and then things are much better. So we need, even for our entrepreneurs, to start investing in things that are much more dynamic, into tradables. We need to start exporting more. So we need to help these entrepreneurs, because they will not do it on their own, given the way our society, our economy is today. So let's help. Let's channel money into productive endeavors.
Let's paint a picture. Sometimes it's good to do that, because it can be a wake-up call. If we look at generally Africa and the way things are happening now, be it policy and the way all our wealth is being taken and so on, 50 years from today, if the trend continues as it is, where do you see us? Because maybe that would be a slap in the face to realize that, look, 50 years from today, this is what is going to happen. We shall have sunk, and so we need to wake up, or maybe we are making a bit of progress, or that kind of thing.
As we are in a race to the bottom. We are racing to the bottom if we do not change the way we do these things. I've told you that our minerals, our resources, our hydrocarbons and minerals are the foundations of industrialization. That's the history of it all. I mean, look at the first industrializer, Great Britain. What did they use to industrialize? They used their iron ore and their coal. The next industrializers, Germany, Netherlands, France, then later on, 100 years later, the US, they've used their resources. The other industrializers, Japan, did not have natural resources. What did they do? They got them from elsewhere, from Africans. We foolish Africans, we gave them. And they build their economies. So that's what China has been doing in the last 20 years. They take from us and they build their own thing. So you need, the point I'm making, that you need these resources to industrialize. Whether you use your own or you import from others who are foolish enough to just give away theirs. So because they are finite, because they get finished, 50 years from today, if we continue in the same mode, our things will be finished, will still be untransformed, will still be pre-industrial, and the other guys would have moved on. And in that time, you asked about 50 years from now. Let me take even less than 50 years. Today we are 1.2 billion Africans. In 2050 we shall be 2.5 billion Africans, 1/4 of mankind. In about less than 40 years, we'll be 2.5 billion, would have doubled. And of course, most of these are young guys. If we continue in the same mode, I don't know what those people will be doing. So we need a complete transformation before then.
Do you see and feel a desire for these things to change? You're passionate about this. I've met a couple of people that are passionate about this, but sometimes it seems like a head-banging project. You're seeing things a certain way, and nobody else is seeing them the way you are.
Yeah, but you see, for a good idea, an idea to take root, maybe it's not going to have to be a mass thing where people come to public rallies and they all cheer. Yeah. No. It just needs for 1, 2, 3 critical people to pick it up and run with it. I mean, the people who cause change in nations, in societies, are not the masses. It takes 1, 2, 3 people who are well positioned, pick it up and run with it, and then get the people to follow you.
You have put down your thoughts in this book, Africa's Industrialization and Prosperity. We have touched, from SO syndrome to structural adjustment strategy. We have touched quite a bit that's in this book, but if one were to ask you what you're trying to communicate in this book, what are you trying to tell, be it Africans and whoever it is that you get a hold of this?
Let's have a mindset change. Without a mindset change, we will continue wallowing in poverty. We are at the bottom of just about every, or the Human Development Index. In just about everything, we are the poorest. We are the most sick people because we are poor. We have no prosperity. We need to change our mindset and understand that prosperity comes from nowhere else but through industrialization. That's been the history of all the nations. Look at the last 300 years. That's what everybody has done. I'm emphasizing that we have what it takes, the ingredients, what we call the natural capital. Let's start understanding that we need to change the natural capital into productive capital. That's how prosperity comes. Once, if we treat the natural capital as food to eat, I get my copper, and sell it to whoever, then that person is taking your natural capital, he's making it into productive capital, he becomes prosperous, he has jobs, he changes his country, and then he sells the things back to you. So we should stop being producers of primary commodities and let's become a secondary economy. All of Africa, that's what's going to take us out of our poverty. That's what's going to prosper our nations.
You use the biblical figure, Esau, some people will say, from Esau syndrome to structural adjustment strategy. Talk to us about that. Why this man? There were several others.
Yeah,
in that good book.
Esau, or Esau, I prefer to call him Esau, is a man found in Genesis 25. This is a guy who had a lot of things. He had, he was the firstborn of his in their family, and therefore the heir. But one day he was very hungry, and his brother came home. His younger brother called Jacob. He came home and said, and Esau told Jacob that, "I'm hungry. And Jacob was a very good cook. So cook me something. Then, so Jacob tells Esau that, oh, you want something to eat? It's okay, I'll cook something for you, but just give me your inheritance. So Esau said, oh, what use is my inheritance to me right now when I'm hungry? Let me give it to you, and you cook me something. So it's an analogy I've used for our African nations, that we have our inheritance. Actually, the conclusion of that thing says that then Esau despised his inheritance. So Africa, we are despising our inheritance, which is these minerals and hydrocarbons, what I call natural capital. I'm stopping to call them minerals because it means you mine and extract them. No, it is natural capital, which has been in the ground for millions of years. Because we are hungry in 1971 up to 2017, which is a very short time in the thing of a nation. It's like you being hungry at lunchtime today. So we say, what use is this inheritance to me when I'm hungry, when I need a rod, when I need a little something here? You give it away to the other person, and he gives you, the story says that he got a bowl of soup. So you get a bowl of soup, which can be a rod. A rod lasts how many? 15 years. 15 years is nothing in the lifespan of a nation. So you give it away, and you get your rod, and then the other person takes your natural capital, and he makes it into productive capital. He gets jobs for his people. He builds his economy. And for you here, you have despised your inheritance.
Do you worry that we are not a reading people? You can feel that there's a bit of picking up. A couple of Ugandans have begun to write, like yourself and several others, but we still have this challenge. There's so much wealth of information in books like this one, but the people that should read this do not want to read, or are too busy doing other things.
I think some of our people are good readers. There are some who read. I know, for instance, I know that the president reads. He's a very knowledgeable man. He reads. And I think it is great that the president reads. I don't know about other people around him, but it's one of the sad indictments about Africa. They say that if you want to hide something from an African, put it in a book. We need to wake up from that. People need to stop thinking that you seek knowledge when you are in school, then after that, nothing. That's why we stagnate. People keep reading elsewhere. I sit on aeroplanes. You know, I travel different parts of the world. One of the sad things is many of us Africans, we sit on the plane, you're playing with your Kalito electronic, watching a movie, electronic gadgets. Other people are reading. They're seeking knowledge. They're gaining knowledge. So we need to get out of that mode. I think the education today, my daughter is in equivalent of senior 6 now. Their school emphasizes reading a lot. So they do read. So maybe that generation, the younger generation, is starting to read, unlike us, who lost out when we were chasing Magendo and other things.
Hopefully things change. So who's your target audience for this book?
The target is, you know, I went with this book to Lagos, Nigeria. We launched it there at a conference in Nigeria. And the conference, the leader of this organization where we were is a reader. He reads the way I've said our president reads. He told the conference participants, and were about maybe 600, 700, 800, 1,000, whatever the number was. He asked that, how many people in this audience have a university degree? Most of us, maybe 90%. So these days everyone has a degree. He said, if you have a degree, you must read this book, which was good. So I'm saying anyone who has a degree should read this.
So campus cannot read this?
No, well, they are on their way to getting degrees. I spoke to an economics teacher, secondary school economics teacher recently, and he thinks this would be good for his secondary school people, so let alone university. So people who have degrees, but most of all, people who are in a position to influence policy at whichever level, be it legislators, be it think tanks, be it cabinet members and whoever else. Yes.
All right, there you are. The book is Africa's Industrialization and Prosperity. Something that we are looking forward to. We want to see Africa industrialize. We want to see Africa prosper. Can that happen? I hope to see it in my time. I hope to participate in making this happen. I don't want to be among those that watch, and clearly you are participating in this. Thanks a bunch for joining us. Where can people get this book?
It's available in all major book stores. Book Point. Aristoc, I believe, is about to stock it, but there is Book Point in Kampala, Book Point in Lubowa. There is Wordsmith in Lubowa. There is La Fontaine in Kampala. There is Fresh Vine in Kampala. But you can also come to me, Joel. Yeah, I sell them from the boot of my car. So that's the way you can't vend books the way I'm a newspaper man, and we normally vend newspapers on the street like this. I can't do that way, but I'm also able to do it from the boot of my car.
There you are, Africa's Industrialization and Prosperity. There's a wealth of information here. This man did research for how long?
This took about 4 years, 4 years of research. Yes.
So there you are.
So we actually have study cases from all over Africa, from about 18 or so African countries: South Africa, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Zambia, Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, DRC, Congo, Chad, Ethiopia, Egypt, Nigeria, Ivory Coast, Ghana, Senegal, no, not Senegal, but Liberia and Guinea. So it's fairly well deep, and then it gives quite a bit of history, because to know where we've come from, particularly with the leaders who used to be leaders in the 1960s. And so it gives a bit of history, a lot of history, and then study cases from all over the country, all over the continent.
All right, so get the book, read it, and do something about these things. David Sseppuuya, it's been a pleasure having you here.
Thank you, Joel.
Okay. Look, things are not okay. I know many times we want to console ourselves, and for we Christians who keep riding on hope, that's very important. Let's pray, but let's roll up our sleeves and let's get our hands dirty. Let's do something about some of these things. It's going to be hard work. It's going to be sacrificial. But things have got to move for the better. Others have done it. The Asian Tigers has been telling us about. We're at the same level with them, you know, in the mid-1900s. But look at what they are today. They are first world. We are struggling to become middle income. And not just middle income, but lower middle income. We are struggling for that. We can strive for better. Hopefully that can happen. Africa's Industrialization and Prosperity. Get a copy of that book and read it, for your good and for the good of Uganda and Africa. That's the big story for today. Thank you for joining us. My name is Joel Senyonyi.